You are in for a real treat. This episode was originally recorded for my other podcast, but for you, it's been upgraded and transformed, and now you have the Ask the Pro show. So everything mentioned in this episode will now be found on chrisdufay.com, plus so much more, as I've designed the Ask the Pro podcast and chrisdufay.com to give you exactly what you need to grow your business success and for you to have the money, the freedom, and the happiness you want, making a bigger and better impact to the world unselfishly. So now it's time to delve straight into this episode, and I want you to lap up and enjoy every single second of it. The brother from another mother, Jesse Lawler. I'm absolutely loving having you here with me on the podcast. Firstly and foremost, I'm really thankful you've taken the time for myself and the listener to come on, because I know what we're going to be delving into today. Personally, I'm just being really selfish, and I just want to chat with you and just make sure that we can get some awesome info, and the listener's just going to be a fly on the wall in our conversation here. But Jesse, thanks so much, mate.
Hey, man. Thank you. It's my pleasure being here.
Right. So before we even delve into this, there's obviously a lot of common misconceptions about neuroscience and kind of psychopharmacology as well, and everything that you're doing with Smart Drug Smart as well. So maybe in a nutshell, bad boy, can you say who you are firstly and why you're so phenomenal, but also what you're doing?
Okay. I am, well, I guess my real life is as a software developer. I popped out of university with a computer software engineering degree, and that's what I've been doing for most of the past 15, 20 years. But along that road, I discovered the existence of these things sort of called under the general umbrella of smart drugs or cognitive enhancers, or, basically things that you can put down your throat that are going to make your brain work better instead of worse. And as a software developer, where a lot of my job was to have these long periods of intense focus when I just wanted to, snap on the earphones and go into my hole and, have my fingers whiz across the keyboard uninterrupted, I was really fascinated to find out that, hey, there's some of these supplements that can actually help me do that better. And so that kind of got me started as a hobbyist a few years ago, kind of delving into what smart drugs were available. And that led to me starting a podcast probably almost 3 years ago now. We're coming up on our 3-year-old birthday. Nice. It's called Smart Drug Smarts. And at this point, it's a weekly thing where I'm calling up and speaking with different neuroscientists and brain hackers and neurologists and people that are working on things like transcranial direct current stimulation and basically anything that somebody can do to try to amplify their own intelligence. And so it's really become like an increasing part of my own life, just based out of something that at first it was me scratching my own itch, and now it's just become a real fascination for me.
It's fantastic, because I obviously love that you have started from scratching your own itch, and I think that's where it's just been so organic, the growth, and why everything's been so great, but also why you've attacked it. Like, I've been listening to so much of your stuff with Smart Drug Smarts, and it's just really good information that's easily digestible. I think a lot of people might be initially kind of turned off, because it might kind of be a little bit too nerdy, but I try and embrace the nerd in myself. And I think what we can delve into today with really looking into how, with your insights, Jesse, can somebody improve their cognitive power, improve their brain power for training, and also on the business side as well. I would really like to look at both aspects for that. So where do you see the common hurdles, let's call them, what people, when they first delve into this arena?
Yeah, well, I guess like the first thing that I should throw out there is, like, a lot of people instantly they hear the word like drugs in my podcast title, and they're like, whoa, that sounds scary right off the bat. And the thing is, it's like, this is one aspect of how people can improve their cognition, and it's by no means the only aspect. I think that the kind of stuff that your listeners are probably into with physical fitness and, good nutrition and good sleep, it's like all this stuff is absolutely foundational. And I really try to make the point that if you've got crappy lifestyle habits, then throwing a couple different pills down your throat, it might not even, they might boost you a little bit, but it's not even going to necessarily bring you up to where your physiological baseline should be. So all of these things I think really work in conjunction. It's like, I exercise frequently. I've got crappy sleep habits, but other than that, I do all the right stuff. It's like my diet's pretty good. My exercise habits are pretty good. And for me, the cognitive supplements are kind of the icing on the cake, but I think it's worth studying how all of it works together, because these are all multipliers, essentially. They're all multipliers on sort of whatever your baseline performance is. And so being aware of, what you can do to augment your performance, and being aware what you can take out of your life that might be decrementing your performance are all really important things.
Fantastic. I do really appreciate that you brought that up, because I think so many people are kind of looking for a bit of a magic potion, a silver bullet to what's going on. And what's that movie called where that dude takes that?
Limitless.
Sorry, I would probably agree that I'm probably the 1001st person to bring that up to you. So I'm sorry about that. But I think
it's funny. It's like that is the kind of the official movie of the nootropics movement. A lot of people who had never heard of smart drugs, it's like you reference that movie and they're like, "Oh, that thing, does that actually exist?" And it's like, no, not really the way it's presented in the movie. It does not actually exist. Here's something I guess would be worth saying also. So like in that movie, like the version of the drug in Limitless is something which essentially like expands that guy's brain power beyond what a human brain is really capable of. Nobody is quite as smart probably as the dude in that movie when he's, on that drug. What the drugs that we have now are capable of isn't really taking you beyond your biological thresholds, your biological maximum. It's more about helping get you in your biological maximum and stay there for a longer period of time, or get there with less effort than you might otherwise be able to. Maximizing the amount of time that you might be in like a cognitive flow state.
Okay, beautiful. Now, does this also kind of segue over into psychedelics as well?
I would say no. I mean, I would like to do a couple of episodes on some of the psychedelic substances, because I think that people that tend to be interested in smart drugs are interested in psychedelics and vice versa. But it's really kind of two different things. Most of the people that are looking to learn about smart drugs are looking for sort of increased focus, and psychedelics I think are probably great for increased like creativity, but it's not necessarily something where you're going to want to sit down and write your term paper while you're tripping on mushrooms.
Yeah, maybe not. It could be a bad idea. Okay, so you know what? Maybe let's start with this, Jesse. With the actual, let's just put a bit of a foundation out. We will cover the nutrition and kind of training and all those different aspects as well, but let's start with, what are the mechanisms behind why the smart drugs make you smarter?
Wow. Okay. That's a great question. It sounds like it would be easy, but there's actually, smart drugs is not like one class of chemicals. It's sort of an umbrella term that's given to a bunch of different things, which might, for one reason or another, augment different types of intelligence. Intelligence itself is like a pretty broad term. It's not just one thing. There's kind of a bunch of different scales that can be moved independently. There was this book, I think it was in the early 90s, maybe, that came out called like The Seven Intelligences, and broke down intelligence into things like, linear mathematical intelligence, or emotional intelligence, or kinesthetic intelligence, the intelligence that like a ballerina might have, knowing where all the parts of her body are at once. And there's a lot of different systems within your brain that could each potentially be augmented or decremented independently of one another. And similarly, there's the whole lot of these different chemicals out here which might help one aspect, hurt another aspect. And the mechanisms of action within things that we consider to be smart drugs are all over the place. There are like, for example, some of the ADHD drugs like Ritalin, which methylphenidate is the scientific term, or Adderall. These things tend to work by promoting the release of dopamine. Dopamine is a motivational neurotransmitter. And so it makes you more motivated to do things like, for example, sit down for the next 10 hours and work on your term paper. That's one sort of amplification. There are other things like, like caffeine or modafinil, which aren't necessarily going to do like a dopamine dump, but are going to help you just be more alert and stay awake longer, or have less what they call sleep pressure from the buildup of adenosine in your brain. And so, simply being more alert can, sort of have the same effect as augmenting intelligence. There are other things which are mood enhancers. And even though enhancing your mood isn't necessarily making you smarter, it's pretty clear that if you're in a good mood, you're more likely to get stuff done than if you're depressed and feeling mopey and have no motivation to accomplish anything. So there's really all sorts of different chemicals within this umbrella, and they have a lot of different mechanisms of action. It's not just one thing.
Okay, this is really good. So obviously, what you've covered is great because it shows it really comes down to the individual and where they need to step their game up, because there is so many sort of different factors that could actually be where they want to go down. And say if someone's thinking, oh, okay, like I need to start delving into, say, using some smart drugs or something like that, and they go down the modafinil route, but really it's not that. They might be needing a boost in a different neurotransmitter to actually get the effect that they're looking for. How does someone go about then knowing where or which route they should go down?
Yeah. Well, okay. So great question there too. One thing that I found, which has been very surprising to me, actually, like this was not something that I would have guessed at the time that I started the podcast, but since doing that, I've talked with so many different people about this stuff. The effects really vary strongly from person to person, more so, I think, with drugs that affect the brain than with drugs that affect other parts of the body. Part of this might be because the brain itself is such a plastic organ, is such a, it's built up from the time that we're born based on how we use it. And you know, the variability in a human brain is more so than the variability in, say, a human bicep or a human knee or something like that. Mm-hmm. And some drugs that really have a strong effect on one person, the other person might not feel at all, or might have an opposite effect. You know, most people are woken up by caffeine, and it kind of produces this extra energy and sometimes even jitters and overexcitability. But I've spoken with more than a few people that say that caffeine makes them sleepy, which is, you know, just ass backwards from what you would expect. But I think that for most people, it's probably worth trying several different supplements and kind of charting, like not all at once, obviously. It's like, don't take your whole medicine cabinet at once.
Chewing on them like Skittles.
Well, I mean, because if you don't sort of break it up and try things like, okay, I'm going to do this for a few days, I'm going to do that for a few days, and sort of chart your results, you're never going to know what's doing what. So when I'm trying something new, I like to kind of, you know, wash some other stuff out of my system, not necessarily do anything that I'm not super familiar with for a few days. And then if I'm going to add something new, then I'll have a sense of, hey, how is this one thing affecting me? And the same goes for diet or anything else. It's like if you're having an allergic reaction, you're not sure what food you're reacting to. It's best to kind of go down to a really, really simple diet for a while, then add foods in one at a time and see where the allergic reaction starts to come back. I think it's very much the same thing with any sort of cognitive compound. You want to know what's going to affect you. So it's sort of important to like isolate these different interventions you might take.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a split with so much more for you. Now, I know you're listening and tuning in because you know how important your health is and how this can also catapult your business. This is why I'm very happy to say that this podcast is sponsored by My Body Blends and my favorite, the Superfood Elixir, the powerful greens drink. Now, this is designed specially to boost energy, aids detoxification, enhances the ability to burn fat, supports healthy carbohydrate metabolism, and best of all, is voted best tasting greens drink. Now, myself and the My Body Blends team are looking for ambassadors to join, so you and your clients get the health benefits plus adding in a strong income stream for you and your business. The ambassador program, which is by application only, means you get exclusive access to sell My Body Blends products like Superfood Elixir to your clients, plus giving you the special ambassador pricing and bonuses. So once you become an ambassador, you can join the other top health and fitness players that are adding thousands to their week's income. Now, there is only a limited number of ambassadors we are taking on board, as this is a tribe leading the way together. So to apply and to join, go to mybodyblend.com/ambassador or add the checkout code that is TurningPro, all one word, when you're going to get your own Superfood Elixir to order. Plus, you're going to get free shipping and a bonus to save yourself over $250 instantly. So just use that coupon code TurningPro in the checkout and you can save over $250 right now, all on mybodyblend.com. That's really good advice. I spot on agree with that, especially like with the kind of correlation to what you just said, like with an elimination diet. And even say with myself, so recently I've just been doing
a bit of a self-experiment with taking my blood sugars with a glucometer every waking hour and tracking it along with how I eat, how I sleep and everything like that, and seeing how I can keep my blood sugar levels low, but also kind of trying to hack the system, as in how can I actually eat as many carbs as possible and what works the best that way as well. And this would be really interesting as to what goes down. Now, you said before, and this kind of just brought up a thought of modafinil and caffeine. Are they more dopamine dominant with what they affect?
Let's see. Caffeine, I know, does promote the release of dopamine to some extent. Modafinil is an interesting one, and it's got a couple of chemicals in its family. There's adrafinil, modafinil, and armodafinil, which you can kind of think of as a chemical family. They all behave very similarly in the system. Adrafinil is actually a biological precursor to modafinil. So if you eat adrafinil, it breaks down inside your body into modafinil. You just need to eat more of it. But the reason that these are typically prescription drugs in the Western world rather than something that you can just buy over the counter is because the mechanism of action is not particularly well understood. Different scientists think that different things may be going on, and nobody's really exactly sure how it's doing what it's doing. It seems to be a relatively safe compound. There aren't a lot of people that have negative effects from it, but it's not terribly clear what's happening. It's not like a dopamine release in the way that like Adderall or Ritalin is. They think I believe they think it might be a GABA inhibitor. GABA is a neurotransmitter that tends to sort of calm you down, mellow you out. And so by, basically causing the uptake of GABA from the brain, it's making you a little less likely to kind of feel that calming down effect and thus keeping you up.
Okay, awesome. Now, when we start looking at taking certain things, so say like, all right, someone goes down the modafinil route. Okay, this is fantastic. I guess the first idea, and I can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, is you wouldn't want to be taking that close to bedtime because obviously you want that GABA around in the PM for, say, that yin type of state. Otherwise, you'd be doing backflips in bed. And say, like, along with caffeine as well. So this was interesting because I actually had some genetic testing done and I came back as a fast metabolizer for caffeine. So I can actually handle quite a bit of caffeine. I do take quite a bit of caffeine, say, like pre-workout. I don't drink a lot of coffee, though I've just found this really good cold drip coffee down the road, and I've kind of been getting into that lately. So that's been enjoyable. What would be some other avenues someone could look down?
Well, a big one is the racetam family of chemicals. The original thing one of the terms that when people are looking into smart drugs, you're going to start seeing the word nootropic all over the place, like tropics, like the Tropic of Cancer with NOO on the front. And nootropics is sort of a scientific sounding term that it was like a Greek term that was made up in the mid 60s to define this family of chemicals that have, positive effects on cognition and are neuroprotective and non-addictive, and you don't build up a tolerance to. And it really essentially anything that really meets all the criteria for a nootropic would be more or less a miracle drug. One of the things that you'll find is people start throwing around, in the online retail world, nootropic gets thrown around without much attention to that sort of more strict definition. Nowadays. You'll hear people say things like Adderall is a nootropic. And if you go back to the original definition, there's no way it is, because there are negative physical effects and it is prone to addiction and all these things. But yeah, so the racetams, the original one was a drug called piracetam, which was invented in the mid 1960s and was found to have neuroprotective effects and some memory increase effects and things like that. And this was originally used and still is used, actually. It's a prescription drug in Europe for people that are coming down with things like Alzheimer's or senior dementia, and really starting to have their brains kind of go on a steep downhill late in life. And what's been found is that a lot of these drugs that have protective effects or kind of like propping up a fading brain can also be maybe not equally useful, but definitely useful and helpful for people that are much later in life. It's kind of like anything else. Like the more problems you have, the easier it is to make improvements with something. And so if somebody's like starting to come down with Alzheimer's, there's a lot of things that you can do to improve their brain just by like clearing out the gunk. But if somebody's brain is still, young and healthy and they're in their cognitive prime, they don't necessarily, have as far to go as far as how much they can be improved. But on the other hand, most people aren't in a cognitively optimal state all the time. And so if you can do something like improve your working memory by 10 or 15%, that can still have huge benefits. So yeah, the racetam family of chemicals is one that at this point, since the 60s, has spawned to like 15 or 20 different things that exist, all with the suffix racetam. My personal favorite of them is one called aniracetam. We actually just released a supplement line which has aniracetam as sort of the hub of one of the products. But yeah, for me, aniracetam is something that I'll take probably 3 or 4 times a week, and I find to be really kind of a creativity enhancer. And I think the reason for that is that it tends to increase short and medium term memory, kind of so you can hold more ideas in your working memory at one time. And then I kind of feel like the putting those ideas up against one another, you tend to have those aha moments more often that, ooh, look at how these two things, intersect.
Yeah, I definitely see that. It's funny. It's just because I was thinking yesterday, I was riding back from the gym on my bike and I pulled over 3 times because I was like, if I don't write this idea down right now, I will lose it. And so I was constantly pulling over. So I think a bit of aniracetam would be right up my alley. Now, what about, say, fatigue? I know a lot of people, especially in the health and fitness world, would be dealing with this. Either they're starting to push the barrier too much with their training, or just their kind of work-life schedules are becoming a bit much and they're just dropping out with their performance, both with their sort of, say, professional and their training. Where do we start to go for the fatigue route?
Yeah, well, it would be great to circle back to something you asked a minute ago, which was about, things like modafinil and caffeine late in the day. And I feel like some of these things that are, stimulants, or at least like awakeness amplifiers, it's really important to recognize how strong they can be, and not to kind of cheat and rob your sleep schedule, because at some point you've always got to pay the piper. It's like you could take something like a hyperdose of caffeine or modafinil or armodafinil and cause yourself to stay up relatively effectively with relatively undecremented performance for a hell of a long time. But you're kind of just, you're borrowing from your future self, and that tends to have bad results eventually. I've spoken with some people that their rule is don't take modafinil after 9 a.m. You're like, whoa, after 9 a.m.? But when you think about it, most of these things are slowly getting cleaned out of your bloodstream by your liver. And so they've got like a half-life in your system. The same as like, uranium, radioactive uranium has a half-life where, over thousands or millions of years, whatever it is. Most of these chemicals have a half-life where every X period of time, your liver cleans about half of it out of your bloodstream. And I think that for caffeine, for most people, but different people metabolize it differently, as you said. But for most people, it's about 6 hours. So you have a cup of coffee, you get maybe 100 milligrams of caffeine. 6 hours later, you'll only have 50 milligrams of circulating caffeine. 6 hours after that, you'll only have 25 milligrams. Now, modafinil has a half-life of about 15 hours. By contrast, in armodafinil, it's about 18 hours. So these are really, really long-lasting things. You take them and they're still in your system a couple days later in measurable quantities. And so, you just kind of want to be aware with any supplement you're taking, how long it's going to be around in your system. One of the things that I like about aniracetam is I do get a pretty strong cognitive kick from it, and yet it's sort of in and out of me within about 4 to 5 hours. It's like it's a nice smooth downslope back to how my brain would normally be feeling and behaving. And so I wouldn't take aniracetam at 10 o'clock at night, but I wouldn't think twice about taking it at 5 p.m. if I have some stuff that I want to get done in the evening.
Yep. Okay, that's excellent. All right. So let's kind of like move on down to the route. And this was interesting because we were chatting yesterday actually a little bit about diet and stuff like that. How does the diet side of things intertwine with brain performance?
Wow, huge. Some of this stuff I would like to refer like you probably have already talked with an expert on microbiome and gut health on your show.
Yeah.
But I am not
such a big fan of it. I'm more than happy to delve back in there.
Yeah, no. I was just going to say, like, there are people that know far more about it than me. So I would say, like, that's episode worthy unto itself. I am not that expert, but that's really worth knowing, because any of these things that you're putting into your mouth, it's got to make it through the wall of your gut before it's going to make it into your bloodstream, cross the blood-brain barrier, and wind up having effects on your brain. So, maintaining really good gut health is great to make sure that, the supplements that you're buying and paying for and, putting in your system are actually going to have an effect. It doesn't matter if you wind up peeing it out, but, or in that case, I guess, crapping it out. So yeah, as far as how nutrition can affect your cognition, I think it's really, really hugely effective. There's a lot of bad toxicity that is part of the standard American diet, standard Western diet, that people should be aware of. If you're eating, I mean, I like the rule that if you're eating a food that your great grandparents wouldn't have recognized, it's probably a bad idea. It's like your great grandparents probably would have recognized a banana, a potato, a slice of steak, something like that. But you handed them a Captain Crunch pellet or a Cheeto, they're going to be like, what is this thing? And those tend to be the things that, come in cardboard boxes or plastic wraps or whatever that have a bunch of unnatural compounds in them, which isn't to say everything unnatural is unhealthy, but it's as far as diet, it's generally not really worth taking the risk. It's such an easy rule of thumb to stick with natural foods and draw the benefits from doing that.
Yeah.
That it kind of seems like you've got to have a really good reason not to do that.
I think it's so true. And I think especially like a lot of the time, and I'll use myself as an example, I'm more than happy to, it was a couple of weeks ago, I was just like, screw it. I felt like having a bit of a splurge, it was a bit of a cheat meal. I kind of needed to put some carbs back into my body and just went hell for leather with it. It was great. But the next day, and it's not like if I really push it, say with like too much ice cream or whatever it is, physically, I look better and my body can uptake it, but it's my brain the next day that I'm just like, I'm just not running it 100%. And that's where I feel most guilty about it, because I'm just like, this is not good, because I know the next day is just going to be under par and I just don't want to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really worth recognizing just how much biological cost our brains have. Our brains are about 2 to 3% of our body weight, and they take something like 25% of our total metabolic energy during the day. If you're working out huge and bicycling up the side of a mountain, maybe it's only 20% and 25%, but like pound for pound or ounce for ounce, there's just these energy drains, these very expensive organs. And so, anything that you're doing to kind of mess up your overall performance, you're going to feel that more in your brain oftentimes than anything else, because it's a needier organ than our other stuff. One of the things, so mitochondria, I'm sure you've talked about mitochondria on your show. There, within every cell in your body, you have multiple dozens or even thousands of mitochondria, which are producing adenosine triphosphate, which is kind of the common energy system that all your cells use for everything. And brain cells, neurons, are some of the most mitochondrially dense cells we have in our body. They constantly need energy to fulfill our thinking demands. Even when we're sleeping, even when we're doing nothing, it's like your brainstem is running your breathing, your heartbeat, like all that stuff. It's just, this background need.
It's churning. Okay. What about, because we were chatting yesterday about the keto style diet, and I know some people in the fitness industry have been exposed to it, especially with the neurotransmitters of, say, acetylcholine and dopamine. That's where you really want to give them a kick in the morning. Hence why eating carbohydrates in the morning might not be the best idea, and more of a breakfast of protein and fat will help that come about. Where are your thoughts with what you're doing with yourself and what you've seen work?
Yeah, well, okay, so I've done a whole lot of different dietary stuff over the years, and most recently I've been gumming around with a ketogenic diet. So the short version is like a ketogenic diet is a very, very high fat diet. It's not even like high protein and high fat and very little carbs. It's like it's actually very low protein too, because your body can do something called gluconeogenesis, which is to actually, if you're eating a very low carb diet, but you still have plenty of protein, your body can actually convert proteins into carbs internally, which is pretty weird. But so it's kind of like your first line of defense for providing your body energy is glucose. You hear about it like, I'm high blood sugar, I'm low blood sugar, blah, blah, blah. If there's enough blood sugar to go around, that's what your body's going to go to for energy. Our fat is like an ultra backup system. When you've run your glucose down to nothing, when you've run what's it called? Glycogen, which is sort of a backup storage system for more sugar within the body down to nothing, then all of a sudden your body starts breaking down fats into something called ketone bodies. There's 3 different types of them. They've got scientific names that I won't even try to pronounce. But they start circulating within your system. And essentially, you can kind of think of all your cells as doing like a gear shift within a car. All of a sudden they say, hey, you know what? There's not enough glucose here. We've got to start burning these ketone bodies instead to provide energy. And for most people, when they transition from burning glucose into burning ketones, it's a big physiological change that goes on. And it takes generally about a week, sometimes 2 weeks or more, for people to fully go through that massive phase change. So there's all these, when you talk about genomics and your genetic code and different genes turning on and off. There's all these different genes that start turning on to process ketones instead of processing sugars. But as this change happens, all of a sudden your body's able to run on this backup power supply of fat. And the reason that I got into this is because a lot of people have said, and I found this just really quite interesting, that your brain runs better on ketones than it does on glucose. For one thing, because it's kind of got a constant, even keel supply of ketones, because you're never going to run out of fat. Whereas the glucose in your blood is going to go up, go down based on how much exercise you've done recently, what you've eaten recently, and you can really knock your blood sugar all over the place. Your fat tends to kind of keep itself constant. And if you're like I'm about 180 pounds, so whatever that is, 82 kilograms, and you probably have maybe 25 pounds of fat somewhere on me, and I'm never going to run that down to zero. There's zero chance that I'm turn myself into a skeleton with 0% body fat. So as long as I've got even a couple pounds of fat somewhere on my body, my brain is going to have all the power supply that it needs if it's used to running on a power supply of ketone bodies rather than on a power supply of glucose. So what's been really interesting about it is that since I've been on a ketogenic diet and really keeping my blood sugar very, very low, is I pretty much feel as cognitively sharp at the end of the day after 12, 14, 16 hours awake as I do when I first wake up in the morning. There's none of this, I just had a big carby lunch and now I feel like I'm sluggish and I need to crash. It's like I might get physically tired because I haven't slept in a while, but I don't feel like my brain kind of doing this wind down. And that's been an interesting change.
Awesome. That's really interesting. I'd love to know, I'm going to be seeing you in Bangkok soon anyway, so it'll be interesting. We can chat about that and give a bit of an update on what's going on. Now, one question left, and this is interesting because I've really wanted this episode to be a kind of a nice little door opening for the listener right now into everything that you're doing, Jesse, and obviously give some good takeaways. What question have I not asked that you think I should have?
Oh, geez. We haven't talked much about sleep. Here's what we haven't talked about for your audience. I mean, people that are doing physical fitness is so huge actually for cognition. It's really there. We have this stupid conception in Western society of the dumb muscle-bound jock, and that's just like a cultural archetype that we've had for I don't know how long. But the crazy thing is that just flies in the face of what science has told us. In study after study for the last 10, 15, 20 years, it turns out that, not surprisingly, our brains require blood and oxygen, and physical fitness and high frequency interval training and things like that all promote blood vessel growth, and including blood vessels that wind up making their way to the brain. And the most cognitively sharp that most people are is the 4 to 5 hours after a really hard, intense workout. So that might make sense for people to think not just about timing their meals around their workout, but also thinking about, hey, what time of day am I going to sort of do my cognitive heavy lifting and do their physical heavy lifting, in a block, 4 or 5 hours before that, because all these things sort of play into one another. So the high intensity fitness is really, really good for cognition.
What about having the best type of workouts? What's needed if someone's especially when someone's really needing to focus and be able to have that concentration throughout their workouts, especially with the supplement industry and the mainstream, what are they missing that you think you could really bring to the table?
Okay, so this is interesting because I've talked with a lot of people that are like, yeah, I'll take a smart drug and then do a workout. And I'm like, well, why the hell would you do that? It's it's for me, as coming at it from a computer programmer perspective, it's I want to take my smart drugs and then think about moving code around, lifting iron. It's I just don't think of that as being really relevant. It's there's nothing wrong with it. It just kind of feels like a waste of the cognitive stimulation. But I might not be seeing something. I might have my own blind spot. One thing I guess it would be worth talking about is, like I said, the mitochondrial enhancement is something which is going to have huge benefits both for physical work, because you need the energy, the mitochondria that are providing adenosine triphosphate for something like a workout, but it's also going to have cognitive benefits for you afterwards, since your mitochondria, like I said, are very dense within your your brain. And so it's something that you can do that's going to promote mitochondrial growth. Like our supplement stack Mitogen is something that's one I take every single day. I take 2 of them before my workouts and then 1 of them at some other point during the day. But that's something that sort of does double duty, both as a cognitive enhancer and a physical enhancer. There are people that are like, I've talked to people who say, I take Ritalin and do a workout, and I don't really get it, but I know that some people do it.
Yeah, right. I've never heard of that, and that's interesting.
I don't know. I mean, I think that might be for people that maybe have a hard time keeping their mind on the task at hand, and they find themselves going into a gym, but then spending most of the time talking with their buddies instead of moving straight from the machine to the next.
Maybe you should just leave the Facebook down and stop looking at the girl on the like rate. It might do some better.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a guy that when I go into a gym, it's like I do one workout, I give myself 60 seconds break, and then I move to the next machine. So staying focused hasn't been a problem for me. But if you're not that person, and you do need kind of like a focus enhancement to kind of keep your mind on the task at hand, then maybe one of these focal enhancers as a pre-workout thing might make sense.
Awesome. Okay, Jesse, I've gone way over time and I don't want to suck anymore, but I think we're going to have to bring you back on, brother, because you've just opened up a world and I've got another list of questions longer than my arms about what we're going to have to go over. But before I'm going to let you go, mate, I know right now the listener is just frothing at the mouth wanting to learn more about you, and especially with what you're doing and with Smart Drug Smart. Where does the listener go now?
Cool, man. Well, this is the easy part. So we've got a podcast called Smart Drug Smarts. And if you go to smartdrugsmarts.com, you'll find out about that. We publish every Friday, have great neuroscientists, nerdy stuff, but try to keep it pretty accessible. And then we've actually got a couple of supplement stacks at Axon Labs, which is axonlabs.io. One is a mitochondrial health product and the other is a cognitive product based around aniracetam.
Oh, Matt, I'm getting straight onto that. Sold. Okay, beautiful. I'm going to make sure those links are in the show notes for you to get straight onto there. Jesse, virtual fist bump coming from me to you right now because I've really enjoyed that. I've taken notes down for myself, and mate, I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon.
Hey man, thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate it.
So now it's time for you to click on over to chrisdufay.com. That's chrisdufey.com to get all the guides and show notes. And if you are wanting the workshops where I walk you through how to build your online business, click on over to chrisdufay.com/start here. This is where I can give you the exact training guides and the workshops for exactly where you're at and the answers that you need. Now, every Friday I'm coming back to you with a new episode. So be sure to subscribe, and if you haven't already, you're going to be getting the world's best insights, the advice and the answers to give you the business, the money, the freedom and the success and happiness that you want. And I want to give you a huge muchas gracias for being here with me, and as always, get in touch with me via the site or via social, as Ask the Pro is about me giving you the answers that you need. So ask away.